in the heart of the whispering peaks, where ancient stone giants slumbered beneath caps of eternal snow, and the wind sang forgotten lullabies through pine needle beards, lay the village of Oakhaven Glade. It wasn't marked on any map known to travelers beyond the Mistvale Pass, for its existence was woven into the very fabric of the land itself, a tapestry of moss-covered roofs, winding cobblestone paths, and trees so old their roots remembered the world's first breath. Here, the air always smelled of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, sweet perfume of moon-petal blossoms that only unfurled their luminous petals after twilight. Every home in Oakhaven Glade was carved from the living trunk of a colossal oak, or built snug against the sheltering curves of ancient stones, their windows glowing with the warm, buttery light of hearth fires. And within one such home, nestled deep within the gnarled embrace of the grandfather oak, lived Elara. Elara was a girl with hair like spun moonlight, often tangled with stray leaves and the occasional sprig of star moss she'd collected on her forest wanderings. Her eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, held a quiet wisdom that belied her 10 summers. She wasn't one for boisterous games or chasing fireflies with the other children, though she loved the twinkle of their tiny lanterns against the deepening indigo sky. Elara preferred the hushed company of old books, the murmur of the river, and the ancient stories whispered by her grandmother, Lyra. Grandmother Lyra was the village's story weaver, her voice a comforting rumble like distant thunder, her hands gnarled and strong from a lifetime of tending herbs and mending tales. She knew the secret names of the forest spirits, the language of the rustling leaves, and the true history of every stone in Oakhaven Glade. It was from Lyra that Elara learned to listen not just with her ears but with her heart, to the subtle magic that hummed beneath the surface of their world. "The world sings, little sprout," Lyra would say, her fingers gently combing through Elara's moonlit hair. "You just have to know how to catch its tune." Elara's favorite place was the small sun-dappled nook by the widest window of their home, where a cushion of woven river reeds lay. From there she could watch the world unfold, the mist spirits dancing over the shimmering mire in the mornings, the sun-hawks circling high above the whispering peaks, and the occasional flicker of a forest sprite darting between the colossal trunks of the ancient trees. But most of all, she loved the books. Not the leather-bound volumes with crisp pages and neat script, but the ones Lyra kept hidden in a carved chest of willow wood, books with covers of pressed leaves, pages of smoothed bark, and words that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, written in a language Elara was slowly learning to decipher, not with letters, but with feelings and images. These were the old stories, the ones that spoke of the time before the great slumber, when magic flowed like a river and creatures of wonder walked the earth. They spoke of the sky whales that swam through clouds, their calls like distant thunder, of the root keepers who tended the world's deepest arteries, and of a time when the very stars could be plucked from the sky and worn as jewels. But always woven into the edges of these tales was a shadow, a whisper of something vast and ancient, something almost forgotten but never truly gone. This particular evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the western peaks in hues of amethyst and rose, Elara was nestled in her nook, a book crafted from the bark of a birch tree resting on her lap. Its pages, thin and papery, were adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and writhe in the fading light. Lyra sat by the hearth, her spindle humming a soft tune as she spun wool into thread, the scent of lavender and simmering stew filling the cozy room. "Grandmother," Elara murmured, tracing a finger over a particularly elaborate carving, a swirling pattern of scales and wings. "This one, it feels different, not like the others." Lyra paused her spinning, her keen eyes, the color of warm honey, turning to the book. She smiled, a knowing crinkle at the corners of her lips. "Ah, the scale-bound chronicle. That one tells of the deep dreamer." Elara's heart gave a little flutter. The deep dreamer. It was a name she'd heard in the faint murmurs of other ancient texts, always accompanied by a sense of awe and a faint shiver of apprehension. It wasn't a name spoken aloud often in Oakhaven Glade, not like the friendly spirits of the forest or the mischievous river sprites. "Who is the deep dreamer?" Elara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lyra's gaze drifted to the flickering flames in the hearth, her expression thoughtful. "Long, long ago, little sprout, before even the oldest oaks of our glade had sent their first shoots to the sun, the world was raw and untamed. Magic pulsed through the earth like a heartbeat, And in those times they were beings of immense power, woven from the very essence of creation. She picked up a small, smooth river stone from a basket beside her, turning it over and over in her fingers. The deep dreamer was one such being, a creature of immense beauty and terrible power, a guardian of the ancient ways. They say its scales glittered like 1,000,000 captured stars, and its eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 ages. They say? Elara pressed, leaning forward, her earlier shyness forgotten. Lyra nodded slowly. Yes, for it is not a creature of now, but of then, a legend, a myth, perhaps a memory woven into the very fabric of our world. The villagers, they call it, the Serpent. A shiver ran down Elara's spine, not of fear, but of a profound sense of wonder. The Serpent. The name was often whispered with a touch of reverence and a hint of caution in the quiet corners of Oakhaven Glade. It wasn't a beast to be hunted or feared in the common sense, but a symbol of something vast and unknowable, a force that had once shaped their world. There were tales of its wrath, yes, but also of its generosity, of the rivers it had carved and the mountains it had raised. What did it do? Elara asked, her eyes wide. It dreamed, Lyra said simply, her voice soft. It dreamed the world into being, or so the stories tell. It dreamed the rivers to flow, the forests to grow, the stars to shine. And then, it dreamed itself into a deep slumber, a sleep so profound that it became one with the earth itself. Its scales became the mountains, its breath, the wind, its blood, the rivers. Elara looked around their cozy home, at the sturdy oak walls, the smooth river stones of the hearth, the very ground beneath their feet. Could it be true? Could all of this, their entire world, be a dream? But if it's sleeping, Elara ventured, why do people still speak of it with such... Lyra smiled, a bittersweet curve of her lips. Because, little sprout, even in slumber a dreamer can stir. And a dream that vast, a dreamer that powerful, its stirrings can still ripple through the world. Sometimes the earth trembles. Sometimes the rivers swell beyond their banks. Sometimes the stars seem to sing a strange, new song. These are said to be the echoes of the Serpent's dreams, or perhaps its restless turning in the earth's deep heart. Elara looked down at the scale-bound chronicle, its carvings now seeming to pulse with a faint internal glow. The swirling pattern of scales and wings now felt less like a drawing, and more like a portal, a window into that ancient dreaming world. There was a particular image on the very last page she'd been examining, a spiral, intricate and mesmerizing, at its heart a single glowing eye, half closed as if in slumber, yet radiating an undeniable power. Is there a way to wake it? Elara asked, the question escaping her lips before she could think better of it. Lyra's spinning wheel stilled completely. The silence in the room deepened, broken only by the crackle of the hearth fire. Lyra's gaze met Elara's, her honey eyes serious. Some say there is. An ancient song, a forgotten ritual, a specific alignment of the stars. But it is not a thing to be wished for lightly, little sprout. To wake such a dream is to risk waking the world itself, to unravel the very fabric of what we know. The deep dreamer's slumber is what keeps our world stable. Its waking, that would be a change beyond imagining. A shiver, this time born of a different kind of awe, ran through Elara. The idea of such a monumental change, of the world being remade by a slumbering giant, was both terrifying and exhilarating. She looked at the book again, the glowing eye on the last page seeming to wink at her. What does this symbol mean? She asked, pointing to a small intricate glyph carved just beneath the half-closed eye. It was a cluster of 3 interwoven circles, each with a tiny star at its center. Lyra leaned closer, her brow furrowed in concentration. She traced the symbol with a gentle finger. This is the Star Weaver's mark. It signifies connection, the binding of 3 into 1. It speaks of the ancient keepers of the Serpent's law, those who understood the rhythm of its dreams. Lyra paused, her gaze distant. There was a family, long ago, said to be descended from these Star Weavers. They bore a similar mark, etched onto their hearthstones, as a sign of their sacred duty. Elara felt a strange pull, a sense of recognition she couldn't explain. She looked from the book to her grandmother, and then around their own cozy home. Her gaze fell upon the smooth, worn stone of their hearth, the very heart of their house. She had never paid it much mind, beyond its warmth and the comfort it provided. But now, she saw it with new eyes. Etched into the largest stone, almost completely worn away by centuries of touch and warmth, was a faint, almost invisible design. 3 interwoven circles, each with a tiny faded star at its center. The Star Weaver's mark, Galway. Her breath caught in her throat. "Grandmother," she whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "Look." Lyra followed her gaze, her eyes widening as she saw the familiar pattern on their own hearthstone. A slow smile spread across her face, a smile filled with a mixture of surprise and profound understanding. "Well, Albie, I always knew our family had deep roots, but I never truly connected that old symbol to the Star Weavers. It was just the family mark." Elara felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't just a story now, it was an Inquiry story. A part of her and family's history was intertwined with the deep dreamer, the Serpent itself. It was as if a hidden door had suddenly swung open, revealing a secret passage in the familiar landscape of her life. "Does that mean we're Star Weavers?" Elara asked, her voice hushed with wonder. Lyra chuckled, a warm, soft sound. "Perhaps, little sprout. Perhaps we are all weavers of stars in our own way, but certainly, it means our family remembers more than we know. It means the old stories are closer than we think." The moon had risen high above the whispering peaks, casting the glade in a silvery glow that filtered through the window. The moon petal blossoms outside unfurled, bathing the air in their luminous fragrance. Elara felt a peculiar shift within her, a quiet awakening. The world, which had always been magical, now felt even more so, imbued with a deeper layer of ancient mystery. That night, as Elara lay in her bed, the soft moss mattress cradling her, the stories Lyra had told her swirled in her mind. The deep dreamer, the serpent, sleeping beneath the earth, its dreams shaping the world. And the Star Weavers, her own ancestors, who bore the mark of connection and understanding. The faint glow of the moon petal blossoms outside her window seemed to pulse with a hidden life, and the distant hoot of an owl sounded like a whispered secret. She closed her eyes, and instead of the usual comforting darkness, she saw a faint, shimmering light. It wasn't the light of the moon or the stars, but something deeper, warmer, and older. It felt like the heart of the earth itself, slowly beating, slowly dreaming. The next morning, Elara woke with a new purpose. The scale-bound chronicle, which she had carefully placed on her bedside table, seemed to call to her. The symbol on the hearthstone now felt like an invitation. She spent the morning poring over the old books, searching for any mention of the Star Weavers, of the deep dreamer's slumber, of the meaning behind the interwoven circles. Lyra watched her with a knowing smile, offering gentle guidance when Elara got stuck on a particularly difficult passage. The Star Weavers were not just keepers of lore, Elara, Lyra explained, stirring a pot of fragrant berry tea. They were also caretakers of balance. They understood that the world needed both waking and sleeping, action and rest. They knew the rhythms of creation and dissolution. Elara looked up from a page filled with intricate diagrams of constellations. "So, they didn't just want to wake the serpent?" "No, not always," Lyra confirmed. "Sometimes, they worked to keep its slumber peaceful, to ensure its dreams were harmonious. They saw themselves as interpreters between the dreaming world and the waking world." This concept resonated deeply with Elara. It wasn't about control or manipulation, but about understanding and harmony. She felt a growing connection to these ancient people, her own kin. Later that afternoon, a soft rain began to fall, pattering gently on the oak roof. Elara decided to brave the weather, wrapping herself in a thick wool cloak Lyra had woven for her. She felt an inexplicable urge to visit the Whispering Glade, a small, secluded clearing at the edge of the shimmering mire. It was a place where the oldest trees gathered, their branches interwoven like gnarled fingers, creating a natural cathedral of silence and shadow. Villagers rarely went there, considering it too ancient, too still, too full of unknown spirits. But Elara had always felt a pull towards it, a sense of profound peace. As she walked, the forest around her hummed with the soft sounds of the rain. The air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth and ancient leaves. Moss cushioned her steps, and the trees seemed to lean in, whispering their secrets. When she reached the Whispering Glade, the rain slowed to a delicate drizzle, as if the ancient trees themselves were holding back the clouds. In the center of the clearing stood a single colossal stone, much larger than any she had seen in Oakhaven Glade. It was dark, almost black, and smooth as if polished by centuries of wind and rain. Strange, faint markings covered its surface, too eroded to be deciphered easily, but they gave the stone an otherworldly presence. It felt like a monument, a marker from a time long past. Elara approached the stone, her heart beating a little faster. She reached out a hand, tracing the faint lines. The stone felt cool beneath her fingers, yet pulsed with a subtle, almost imperceptible warmth. It was here, in this quiet, ancient place, that she felt closest to the stories, closest to the heart of the deep dreamer. As she stood there, a peculiar thing happened. A soft, silvery light began to emanate from the ground around the stone. It wasn't a reflection of the sky, for the clouds still hung heavy. It was an inner glow, rising from the earth itself. The moss at her feet began to shimmer, and the rain-slicked leaves of the surrounding trees took on an ethereal sheen. Then, a sound. Not a roar or a whisper, but a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the earth and up into her feet. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a sound that spoke of immense power and profound slumber. It was the sound of a dream, deep and ancient, stirring. Elara gasped, her eyes wide. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, softly at first, then with increasing intensity. The colossal stone in front of her seemed to pulse with the light, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the faint outline of a massive scaled form within its depths. This was no ordinary tremor. This was an echo, a ripple from the deep dreamer itself. It was the serpent, stirring in its sleep. A strange, beautiful melody began to weave through the air, carried by the wind and the rain. It was a wordless song, made of pure tones and harmonies, utterly unlike any music Elara had ever heard. It spoke of creation, of vast oceans and towering mountains, of the birth of stars and the first breath of life. And as the song grew, so too did the shimmering light, illuminating the whispering glade in a breathtaking display of magic. Elara felt an irresistible urge to follow the music, to understand its source. It wasn't fear that guided her, but an overwhelming sense of destiny, a feeling that this moment, this song, was meant for her. The ancient stories, the Star Weaver's mark, Lyra's words, they all coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. She was connected to this. She looked around, trying to discern the direction from which the song emanated most strongly. It seemed to come from deeper within the mire, beyond the glade, where the mist usually hung thick and impenetrable. No one from Oakhaven Glade ever ventured into the heart of the shimmering mire. It was considered treacherous, home to forgotten bog spirits and shifting ground. But the song was too beautiful, too compelling to ignore. Taking a deep breath, Elara clutched her cloak tighter and stepped off the familiar path, pushing deeper into the ancient, rain-soaked forest, towards the heart of the mire, towards the source of the deep dreamer's song. The world around her was alive with magic, and Elara, a star weaver by blood and spirit, felt an undeniable pull into its unfolding mystery. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth, and something else, something wild and sweet, like night-blooming jasmine mingled with ancient moss. The familiar path, a ribbon of gray gravel, seemed to shrink behind her as Elara's boots sank into the softer ground of the mire. Twisted roots, slick with perpetual moisture, snaked across her new path, grasping at her ankles like curious, sleepy fingers. The towering pines of the outer forest gave way to gnarled willows, their branches weeping silvery tendrils, and colossal cypress trees, their knees rising from the murky water like silent guardians. The deep dreamer's song, which had been a distant lullaby, now pulsed with a clearer, more vibrant hum, not just in her ears but in the very marrow of her bones. It was a melody woven from moonlight and deep earth, from the whisper of forgotten streams and the sigh of centuries-old trees. Elara felt it guiding her, a shimmering thread through the increasingly dense mist that began to swirl around her, obscuring the world beyond a few feet. Her Star Weaver's senses, usually attuned to the delicate currents of the night sky, now turned inward, mapping the unseen contours of the mire. She could feel the subtle shifts in the ground beneath her, the faint, internal glow of phosphorescent fungi clinging to ancient logs, the slow, rhythmic breath of unseen life within the water. This was not the stark, open magic of the stars, but a deeply rooted primal magic, ancient and slow, like the turning of the earth itself. A sudden, sharp tug on her cloak made her stop. She looked down to see a cluster of tiny bell-shaped flowers, their petals the color of twilight, clinging to the fabric. As she gently disentangled them, a faint chime echoed, and the mist around her momentarily parted, revealing a narrow, almost invisible path winding between two moss-covered boulders. It was an invitation, subtle and fleeting. Elara smiled, a shiver of delight running through her. The Maya was awake, and it was watching her. She followed the ephemeral path, her steps careful, each footfall testing the ground. The mist thickened and thinned with the song's ebb and flow, creating a constantly shifting tapestry of veiled secrets. Strange ethereal lights, like trapped fireflies, drifted through the cypress knees, moving with a languid grace that suggested ancient, gentle spirits. Elara knew these were the glimmer wisps, the eyes and ears of the Maya's hidden inhabitants. They were not malicious, but intensely curious, drawn to the vibrant magic that pulsed within Elara. One particularly bold glimmer wisp, a shimmering orb of emerald light, hovered before her, bobbing playfully. Elara extended a hand, and the wisp circled her palm before darting away, leading her deeper, towards a place where the water grew clearer, reflecting the muted gray of the sky like polished obsidian. Here, the trees were even older, their trunks wider than any she had ever seen, draped in hanging moss that looked like the beards of ancient giants. The air was still, save for the gentle plink of water dripping from leaves and the increasingly vibrant melody of the deep dreamer. It was a song of longing, of stories untold, of a profound, ancient sleep. Elara paused at the edge of a wide, still pool, its surface perfectly mirroring the tangled canopy above. The glimmer wisps seemed to melt back into the surrounding mist, leaving her alone with the profound silence and the song. She knelt, dipping her fingers into the cool water. It felt alive, pulsing with the same energy that hummed in her own veins. As her touch rippled the surface, faint, iridescent patterns spread outwards, like starlight caught in liquid. From the depths of the pool, something stirred. Not with a splash, but with a slow, deliberate unfurling. A creature emerged, not from the water, but Yuff the water. It was a being of liquid shadows and shimmering light, vaguely humanoid in form, but with limbs like flowing currents and eyes like twin pools, reflecting the deepest parts of the mire. Its skin was like polished obsidian, and tangled strands of water lily roots and iridescent algae seemed to grow from its head like a crown. This was a water wight, a guardian spirit of the mire's purest springs. The water wight regarded Elara with an ancient, unblinking gaze. It did not speak with words, but with images that flowed directly into her mind. Visions of the mire in its pristine youth, of stars falling into its depths, of a time when the deep dreamer's song was sung freely across the land. It showed her the gradual encroachment of the outside world, the slow fading of the Maya's magic, and the deep dreamer's retreat into an ever deeper slumber, its song a desperate plea for awakening. "You are a star weaver." The water wight's silent voice resonated in Elara's mind, a cool, clear thought. "Your blood remembers the starlight that first blessed this place. The dreamer calls to you, to the light that can mend the fading threads." Elara felt a deep ache in her chest, a profound empathy for the hidden heart of the mire. "How can I help?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur in the stillness. The water wight extended a hand, its liquid fingers shimmering. In its palm, a single glowing orb of water floated, swirling with miniature constellations. The dreamer's sleep grows too deep. Its song, though beautiful, is a cry of entanglement. It is bound by the threads of forgotten magic, by ancient fears, by the very essence of the mire itself. To awaken it fully, you must find the heartwood wellspring, the source of its deepest dreams, and untangle the threads that bind it. The water wight then pointed with a graceful, fluid gesture towards the deepest, most shadowed part of the pool. "The way is not easy. It lies through the realm of the whisper weeds, where illusions are spun from your own deepest thoughts. Be wary, Starweaver. Your courage is bright, but the mire can twist even the purest intentions." With a final shimmering ripple, the water wight sank back into the pool, its form dissolving into the dark, reflective surface, until only the subtle glow of the constellation orb remained, now hovering above the spot where it had been. Elara reached out and took the orb. It felt cool and alive in her hand, a tiny, self-contained universe. It pulsed with a faint guiding light, pointing towards the darkest part of the pool. Taking another deep breath, Elara pushed aside the hanging moss and stepped into the water. It was cold, but not unpleasantly so, and surprisingly shallow at first. The ground beneath her feet was soft silt, and ancient roots formed a natural, submerged path. The constellation orb glowed brighter, casting a gentle blue-white light that cut through the gloom. The deep dreamer's song now filled her ears entirely, a complex symphony of yearning and ancient wisdom. It felt as if she were stepping into the dream itself. As she moved deeper, the water grew gradually deeper, eventually reaching her waist. The trees here were even more ancient, their trunks merging with the darkness, their branches forming a dense interlocking canopy that filtered out almost all natural light. The only illumination came from her orb, and the occasional flash of a distant glimmer-wisp. Then, she saw them. The whisper weeds. They weren't like normal plants. They were translucent, glowing strands of shimmering green, woven together like an intricate living tapestry that stretched across the water, forming a shimmering curtain. As she approached, the strands seemed to vibrate, emitting a low, almost inaudible hum, the whisper that gave them their name. The moment she touched the first strand, a wave of sensation washed over her. Not physical, but mental. Images, emotions, memories, her own memories, began to swirl around her, vivid and compelling. She saw her childhood home bathed in starlight, her grandmother's gentle hands teaching her the constellations, the quiet joy of her first star weaving. But then, the images began to twist. Her grandmother's face was shadowed with disapproval, the starlight cold and distant, her star-weaving attempts failing, leaving her alone in the dark. These were the illusions the water wight had warned her about. They fed on doubt, on fear, on regret. Elara closed her eyes, clutching the constellation orb tighter. She focused on the feeling of its cool, steady light, on the constant, unwavering hum of the deep dreamer's song. She remembered her purpose, the beauty of the Maya, the trust the water wight had placed in her. It's not real, she told herself, planting her feet firmly on the submerged path. Keys are echoes, not truth. Or nantier. She opened her eyes. The illusion still swirled, but they seemed less potent, more transparent. She could see, in through them, recognize them for what they were, projections of her own inner landscape, subtly distorted. With a surge of resolve, Elara raised the constellation orb. Its starlight, though gentle, was pure and unyielding. She pushed through the whisper weeds, letting the orb's light cut through the illusory fog. Each step was a battle against the whispers, against the doubts that tried to creep into her mind. She saw visions of herself lost forever in the mire, of the deep dreamer's song turning into a mournful wail, of her failing her lineage, her village, herself. But with each whisper, she countered with a truth. I am a star weaver. I am not lost. I will find the way. Whoa. Now. Slowly, painstakingly, she pushed through the shimmering curtain of whisper weeds. The strands parted before the constellation orb's light, though they seemed to resist, clinging to her clothes, whispering their doubts. Finally, with a last shimmering sigh, she broke through the last of them, stepping into an entirely different space. This was a cavern, vast and echoing, deep beneath the mire. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of ancient rock and pure water. The deep dreamer's song here was no longer a distant melody, but a powerful resonant vibration that filled every corner of the cavern, humming in the very stone. The walls of the cavern shimmered with veins of phosphorescent crystal, casting a soft ethereal glow that painted the space in shades of emerald, sapphire, and amethyst. In the center of the cavern, a pool of water glowed with an unearthly luminescence. This was the Heartwood Wellspring. It pulsed with a deep, rhythmic light, like a beating heart. And within its depths, Elara finally saw the deep dreamer. It was not a creature she could have imagined. It was immense, a vast, tangled entity woven from roots and moss, crystalline growths and living light. It seemed to be both plant and spirit, ancient and ever-renewing. Its form was not solid, but fluid, shifting like currents in water, yet rooted deep within the wellspring. Its core, where the song emanated most strongly, pulsed with a pure white light that was almost blinding. But the dreamer was not free. Thousands of iridescent shimmering threads, like the whisper weeds but far more numerous and complex, emanated from its form, stretching out into the water, wrapping around its roots, clinging to the crystalline walls of the cavern. These were the threads of forgotten magic, of ancient fears, of the Maya's fading memories, binding the dreamer in its profound slumber. Each thread pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, siphoning away its strength, keeping its song from fully blooming. Elara approached the edge of the wellspring, the constellation orb still clutched in her hand, its light merging with the cavern's glow. The deep dreamer's song resonated directly into her mind now, a symphony of its profound story, of the Maya's creation, of the creatures that had called it home for millennia, of the slow, encroaching darkness from the outside world that had forced it into this protective, yet binding sleep. It spoke of a time when stars fell and blessed the Maya, intertwining its destiny with the Star Weavers. As she listened, Elara felt a deeper understanding blossom within her. The deep dreamer wasn't just singing for awakening. It was dreaming the Maya into being, maintaining its delicate balance even in its slumber. If its dreams grew too tangled, too weak, the Maya itself would wither and fade. To untangle the threads, she realized, was not a task of brute force. It was a task of understanding, of empathy, of reweaving. The constellation orb pulsed in her hand, warm and vibrant. It felt like a key. This was the starlight the water wight had spoken of, the light that could mend the fading threads. Elara knew what she had to do. She had to weave starlight into the deep dreamer's tangled dreams, to unravel the knots of fear and forgetfulness, and respin them with hope and remembrance. It would require all of her star weaver skill, all of her courage, and a deep, unwavering connection to the ancient magic of the Maya. She looked at the myriad threads, shimmering and binding, and then at the radiant heart of the deep dreamer. The task felt immense, daunting, yet utterly necessary. The fate of the Maya, and perhaps even the memory of the stars, lay in her hands. Taking a final, steadying breath, Elara extended her free hand towards the glowing wellspring, ready to begin the delicate dance of unbinding and reweaving, to help the deep dreamer awaken fully and sing its song anew, not just for the Maya, but for the world beyond its shifting depths. The magic of the cavern pulsed around her, awaiting her touch. Her fingertips, calloused from roots and dampened by Maya mist, brushed the shimmering surface of the wellspring. It wasn't water, not truly, but a liquid light, cool and vital, like starlight gathered and distilled. The moment contact was made, a jolt, not painful but profoundly electric, surged through her. It felt as if she had plunged her hand into a living heart of pure energy, ancient and vast. Colors exploded behind her eyelids, not seen with her eyes, but felt within her mind. Nebulae of sapphire and emerald, streaks of molten gold, and deep, resonant indigo that pulsed with a rhythm as old as time. Sounds, too, vibrated through her bones, a chorus of whispers, a distant, melancholic hum, and the soft, insistent murmur of countless tiny lives stirring beneath the earth. It was the Maya, concentrated, distilled, and amplified, flowing directly into her being. Steady, Elara. Thistlewick's voice, a solid anchor, reached her through the maelstrom of sensation. He placed a gnarled hand on her shoulder, his touch radiating a quiet strength, a connection to the very earth beneath their feet. The Maya sprite, a shimmering mote of light, danced nervously around her head, its tiny chimes a delicate counterpoint to the growing chorus within Elara's mind. She focused, drawing on the training from her grandmother, on the instincts honed by years of living in harmony with the Maya. This wasn't about force. It was about listening, understanding, and gently coaxing. The wellspring was the dreamer's voice, its essence. And within it, Elara could feel the bindings. They weren't chains of iron or ropes of bramble, but shimmering threads of forgotten sorrow, half-remembered fears, and the slow, insidious creep of neglect. They were woven into the very fabric of the dreamer's consciousness, dulling its light, stifling its song. Elara closed her eyes fully, letting her own awareness extend into the wellspring. She felt herself drift, not physically, but spiritually, into an ethereal ocean of thought and emotion. Here, the cavern dissolved, and she was surrounded by an infinite expanse of swirling colors and faint, ghostly forms. This was the dreamer's mindscape, a realm where time held little meaning, and magic was the very air she breathed. The first binding she encountered was a thick, coiling mist of gray. It felt like apathy, like the slow forgetting of purpose. It clung to a core of vibrant emerald light, attempting to smother it. Elara reached out with her mind, imagining her own magical energy as a gentle breeze. She didn't push, she whispered. She channeled the vitality of the mire, the resilience of the reeds, the persistent shimmer of the will-o'-the-wisps, and imbued it into her touch. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the gray mist began to thin, to recede from the emerald core. As it did, a faint image flickered into Elara's mind, a vast, ancient tree, its roots delving deep into the earth, its branches reaching for a sky filled with stars. This was a memory, a fragment of the dreamer's own vision, briefly glimpsed before the mist surged back, threatening to engulf it once more. "It resists," Elara murmured, her voice strained, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Not maliciously, but like a deeply ingrained habit. "It has slumbered for ages, child," the Maya sprite's voice chimed, clearer now, less anxious. "The bindings have become part of its being. To unweave them is to ask it to remember pains long buried, to shed skins grown comfortable." Thistlewick's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Be its anchor, Elara. Remind it of its purpose, of the Maya it nurtures." Elara nodded, focusing again. She understood. The bindings were a form of protection, a way for the deep dreamer to shield itself from whatever caused its initial retreat. To remove them was to expose it again, to make it vulnerable. She needed to offer it not just freedom, but also comfort, a promise of safety in its reawakening. She began to sing, a soft, wordless melody, a lullaby she had heard her grandmother hum to ailing plants. It was a song of growth, of healing, of the deep, abiding peace found in the heart of the mire. As her voice resonated through the cavern, the liquid light of the wellspring seemed to pulse in time with it. Within the dreamscape, the emerald core brightened, pushing back against the encroaching gray. This time, as the mist thinned, the image of the star-crowned tree held steady. Elara perceived a feeling of vast, quiet joy emanating from it, a deep contentment that had been almost entirely forgotten. She gently coaxed the last tendrils of apathy away, feeling them dissipate like smoke into the boundless expanse of the dreamer's mind. A small victory. But the dreamscape was vast. She drifted further, encountering another tangle, this one a shimmering web of fear, manifesting as jagged shadows that darted and writhed around a core of golden light. This fear felt ancient, primal, a terror of being lost, of being utterly alone. It resonated with a deep, echoing emptiness. Elara felt a chill seep into her bones, a phantom cold that had nothing to do with the cavern's temperature. She recognized the feeling. It was the echo of the mire's own growing desolation, the despair that had settled over its heart as the dreamer's song faded. The fear wasn't just the dreamer's, it was the fear of the mire itself, reflected back. "This is deeper," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It's the mire's own suffering, woven into its protector." Thistlewick knelt beside her, his brow furrowed in concentration. He began to hum, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the floor of the cavern, a grounding chord that spoke of roots and solid earth. The Maya sprite, sensing the shift in mood, grew brighter, circling Elara with greater speed, its chimes taking on an urgent, encouraging rhythm. Elara took a deep breath, steeling herself. She reached out, not to pull at the fear, but to embrace it. She let her own emotions flow into the dreamscape, her compassion for the mire, her determination to see it healed, her unwavering belief in the deep dreamer's power. She poured in memories of the mire's beauty, the sun-dappled glades, the vibrant marsh flowers, the chorus of bullfrogs on a summer night, the delicate dance of fireflies. She wove a tapestry of hope and reassurance. The jagged shadows recoiled from her warmth, hissing softly. But Elara persisted, her mental touch gentle yet firm. She imagined her magic as a warm, golden light, radiating outwards, dissolving the shadows not by force, but by illumination. Slowly, painstakingly, the web of fear began to unravel. As it dissolved, the golden core within it swelled, and Elara caught a glimpse of what it represented, the deep dreamer's vast network of awareness, its ability to perceive every rustle of leaf, every ripple of water, every beat of a tiny creature's heart within the mire. It was the dreamer's boundless empathy, its connection to all life. This was what the fear had sought to protect, yet, paradoxically, had also stifled. The process was excruciatingly slow, each thread of fear feeling like a thorn she had to remove from her own soul. Sweat beaded on Ilara's brow, and her muscles ached from the sheer mental exertion. She felt the drain on her own magical reserves, but she knew she couldn't stop. The mire depended on her. Hours seemed to pass, or perhaps only moments within the timeless space of the dreamscape. Ilara lost all sense of her physical body, becoming a conduit, a weaver of light and intention. She unpicked tangles of resentment, born from the mire's neglect. She smoothed out knots of confusion, the disorientation of a slumber that had lasted too long. She dissolved veils of sadness, the quiet grief of a world slowly forgetting its magic. Each successful unbinding brought a subtle change. The wellspring's glow deepened, shimmering with richer, more vibrant hues. The cavern itself seemed to breathe with a renewed vitality, the air growing sweeter, more alive. Thistlewick, ever watchful, occasionally pressed a cool, damp cloth to her forehead, or offered her a sip of water infused with calming herbs. The mire sprite's chimes grew steadily more joyous, a crescendo of tiny bells. As she delved deeper, Ilara began to perceive a pattern, a recurring motif within the bindings. They weren't just random emotional detritus. Many of them seemed to coalesce around a central, persistent vibration, a dissonant hum that felt alien to the dreamer's natural song. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, hidden beneath layers of the dreamer's own protective mechanisms. This wasn't a natural binding born of time or neglect. This felt imposed. She followed this dissonant hum, pushing through a final dense layer of sorrow that felt like a thick, silken shroud. As she parted it, she found herself not in another swirling expanse of color, but in a strange, geometrically precise chamber within the dreamscape. It was stark, cold, and utterly devoid of the vibrant life force that characterized the rest of the dreamer's mind. In the center of this chamber stood a single shimmering obelisk, not of stone, but of solidified shadow. It pulsed with a faint, malevolent energy, and from it radiated countless fine, almost invisible threads that wove themselves into the remaining core of the deep dreamer's being. These were the true bindings, the ones that held the dreamer in its deepest sleep, far beyond what simple neglect could accomplish. "What is this?" Ilara gasped, her mental voice echoing in the sterile chamber. The sheer alienness of it sent a shiver down her spine. "A relic?" The mire sprite's chime was sharp with alarm. "I felt its presence but never its form. It is not of the mire. It is an old magic, a forgotten silencing spell." Thistlewick let out a low growl, his connection to the earth sensing the unnatural presence. Something from outside then, something deliberate. Ilara stared at the shadow obelisk. It was cold, precise, devoid of warmth or life. It was a prison, meticulously crafted. This was not a tangle to be gently unpicked. This was a foreign body, an intrusion. The threads emanating from it were not merely binding, they were siphoning. She could feel the faint, steady drain on the dreamer's life force, a slow bleed that had kept it weak and dormant for centuries. This was the source of the deep dreamer's profound slumber, the true reason its song had faded to a whisper. Someone, long ago, had silenced it. A wave of righteous anger surged through Ilara. Who would dare to imprison such a benevolent being, the very heart of the mire? What purpose could such an act serve? She reached out, her fingers trembling, towards one of the shadowy threads. The moment her mental touch made contact, a searing cold shot through her, like touching raw ice. Images flashed through her mind, not of the dreamer's memories, but of a harsh, unforgiving landscape, of cold, calculating eyes, of a power hungry for control. She recoiled, gasping, pulling her hand back, her own mind reeling from the sudden, unwelcome intrusion. The obelisk seemed to shimmer with a faint, mocking light. "It defends itself," Thistlewick warned, his voice grave. "It is not merely a binding, Ilara. It is an active ward." "But who placed it?" Ilara whispered, clutching her head, trying to shake off the lingering images. "And why?" "Ancient quarrels, child," the mire sprite sighed, its light dimming slightly in sorrow. There were those who feared the mire's wild magic, who sought to tame it, or extinguish it entirely. They believed the dreamer's song was too unpredictable, too powerful, a force beyond their control. Ilara looked at the obelisk again, then at the vast, suffering mind of the deep dreamer around it. She had come here to heal, to awaken, not to fight an ancient, malevolent enchantment. But now she understood. This was the final greatest obstacle. All the other bindings were symptoms. This was the disease. She had to break it. Summoning every ounce of courage and determination, Elara took a deep, steadying breath. She had to approach this differently. Gentleness wouldn't work here. This demanded strength, resolve, and a pure, unyielding will. She focused on her own core, on the vibrant, earthy magic that flowed through her veins, the legacy of her grandmother and generations of Mirefolk. She imagined it as a forge fire, burning bright and true. She wouldn't attack the obelisk with brute force. She would confront it with the raw, untamed essence of life itself. Reaching out again, Elara didn't touch a thread, but instead centered her focus on the obelisk itself. She began to channel the Myers magic through her, a torrent of green, vibrant energy. It was the magic of growth, of renewal, of life stubbornly pushing through stone and shadow. She poured her intention into it, life against stagnation, warmth against cold, unbinding against imprisonment. The obelisk pulsed, responding to her assault. A wave of cold, sterile energy pushed back against her, attempting to extinguish her vital spark, to flood her mind with despair and futility. Elara gritted her teeth, resisting with every fiber of her being. She felt as if she were standing against an icy gale, her very spirit threatened by the chill. Thistlewick, sensing her struggle, pressed his hand firmly against her back. "Draw strength from the earth, Elara," he urged, his voice resonating with deep, powerful magic. "Let the roots hold you." Below, Thistlewick's own plant magic surged, intertwining with Elara's, creating a conduit of raw, natural power. She felt the ancient, unyielding strength of the Myers bedrock flowing into her, reinforcing her resolve. The Maya sprite, meanwhile, darted around the obelisk within the dreamscape, its tiny form glowing brighter and brighter, striking at the shadowy threads with bursts of pure, shimmering light. Its chimes became a fierce, defiant battle cry. Elara pushed harder, channeling more and more of the Maya's life force. The green energy she wielded began to wrap around the shadow obelisk, like vines relentlessly climbing a desolate tower. Where the green touched the black, there was a fierce, silent struggle, a clash of primal forces. The obelisk groaned, a sound that vibrated through Elara's very soul, a protest against the intrusion of life into its ancient cold purpose. Tiny cracks like spiderwebs began to appear on the surface of the shadow obelisk. A faint, almost imperceptible light flickered within them, struggling to break free. "It is weakening," the Maya sprite chirped, its voice filled with renewed hope. Elara focused all her remaining strength, all her hope for the Maya, into a single overwhelming surge of magic. She pictured the Maya, vibrant and whole, the stars reflected perfectly in its pristine waters. She pictured the deep dreamer, singing its full, glorious song. With a final shattering groan that echoed not in the cavern, but deep within the dreamer's mindscape, the shadow obelisk fractured. It didn't explode, but rather dissolved, crumbling into countless motes of black dust that swiftly faded into nothingness. The cold, sterile chamber vanished, replaced once more by the swirling, vibrant colors of the dreamer's boundless mind. A profound, resonant hum vibrated through Elara's entire being. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, a surge of immense, ancient power, of pure, unadulterated consciousness awakening. The remaining threads that had emanated from the obelisk snapped and dissolved, their source gone. The wellspring in the cavern pulsed with a blinding, joyous light. It swelled, sending ripples of pure, vital energy outward, washing over Elara, Thistlewick, and the Maya sprite. Elara felt years of weariness fall away, replaced by an invigorating surge of life. Her mind, though exhausted, felt clearer, sharper than ever before. Within the dreamer's mindscape, the vibrant colors swirled with renewed intensity. The emerald core, the golden core, the sapphire depths, all pulsed with a unified, magnificent light. The discordant hum was gone, replaced by a symphony of gentle, soaring harmonies. Then a voice, not with words but with pure, resonant feeling, echoed through Elara's mind. It was vast, ancient, filled with gratitude and profound weariness and a dawning, joyous wonder. Kawak, I am awake. Elara opened her eyes, blinking in the dazzling light emanating from the wellspring. Thiswick stood beside her, his face etched with awe and relief. The Mire sprite was a frantic, joyful blur of light, circling the wellspring like a moth around a candle. The cavern itself was transformed. The stalactites dripped with liquid light, the cave walls shimmered with faint ethereal patterns, and the air hummed with a palpable, vibrant energy. It worked, Elara whispered, tears pricking her eyes. We did it. The wellspring began to bubble gently, and from its depths, a new sound began to rise. It was a melody, faint at first, then growing in strength and clarity. It was the Deep Dreamer's song, beginning a new awa. It wasn't a human song, nor even an animal one. It was the song of the earth, of water, of growing things and shifting mists. It was the sound of sunlight filtering through reeds, the whisper of wind over marsh grass, the gentle croak of a hidden frog, the deep slow pulse of the Mire's heart. It was a lullaby, and an anthem, a lament, and a promise, all woven into a single breathtaking tapestry of sound. As the song swelled, Elara felt it resonate deep within her own being, stirring memories and instincts she hadn't known she possessed. She felt the Mire, truly felt it, for the first time in its fullness, its ancient sorrow, its enduring hope, its boundless magic. Outside the cavern, the Mire was beginning to stir. Faint flickers of light, like tiny stars, danced over the surface of the murky water. Patches of dull gray earth began to show hints of green. A soft, warm breeze, scented with the unique earthy fragrance of newly blossoming water lilies, swept through the reeds, rustling them with a sound that mirrored the dreamer's awakening melody. The song was beautiful, overwhelmingly so. But as it grew, Elara realized something crucial. It was not yet complete. There were pauses, lingering notes of uncertainty, vast, empty spaces where other parts of the melody should be. The dreamer was awake, yes, but its song was not yet whole. It was like a magnificent orchestra playing without all its instruments, or a tapestry with missing threads. The voice that echoed in her mind, though filled with gratitude, also held a subtle tremor of lingering fear, a deep-seated apprehension. "Thy silencing is broken, little weaver, but the echoes remain. My song, it is incomplete." Enchanting. Elara looked at the swirling, singing wellspring. The greatest obstacle was overcome, the ancient enchantment shattered. But the deep dreamer, though free, still bore the scars of its long slumber, and the trauma of its imprisonment. Its full power, its complete song, was yet to be restored. She exchanged a look with Thiswick, whose expression was a mixture of triumph and weary understanding. The Mire sprite, though still joyful, seemed to sense the remaining task, its chimes softening into a thoughtful, inquisitive rhythm. The journey wasn't over. This was a new beginning, a profound awakening. But the true healing, the full restoration of the deep dreamer's song, would require more than just breaking a spell. It would require understanding the echoes of that ancient conflict, and perhaps even confronting whatever forces were still at play, still seeking to diminish the wild magic of the Mire. The Mire had begun its journey back to health, but the road ahead, Elara knew, would be long, winding, and filled with new mysteries. The road ahead, Elara knew, would be long, winding, and filled with new mysteries. The immediate aftermath of the spell's breaking was a fragile quiet. The deep dreamer, no longer bound by the cold, silken threads of ancient magic, stirred with a deep, shuddering sigh that rippled through the Mire. It wasn't the vibrant, resonant song Elara had heard in her brief, tantalizing visions, but a soft, hesitant hum, like a forgotten melody struggling to find its way back to memory. The Mire itself reflected this fragility. Patches of vibrant green moss still gave way to stretches of gray, brittle reeds, and the luminous fungi that dotted the trees pulsed faintly, as if conserving their light. "It's awake," Pip whispered, his small, furry body trembling slightly as he stood beside Elara on a newly formed island of soft, springy peat. The air, once heavy with the oppressive silence of the spell, now carried faint, sweet scents of marsh flowers and the distant murmur of water. Elara nodded, her hand resting on the smooth, cool bark of a nearby willow whisperer tree. She could feel the deep dreamer's presence now, a vast, gentle consciousness that permeated the very ground beneath them. It was like a sleeping giant, slowly opening its eyes, still groggy from a long slumber. But its dreams, once vibrant and endless, were still fragmented, its song incomplete. "It remembers some things," Elara murmured, closing her eyes. She felt a gentle current of energy flow from the mire into her, and with it, fleeting images. A time when the mire was too wild, a riot of unchecked growth and untamed energies, beautiful but overwhelming. Then shadowy figures, cloaked in robes of gray, moving with quiet purpose, their faces obscured, but their intentions seemingly benevolent. They sought to balance the mire, to bring order to its magnificent chaos. And in doing so, they had woven the spell that ultimately silenced the deep dreamer, believing they were protecting the mire from itself. They hadn't intended harm, but their fear of the mire's wildest dreams had led them to bind its very heart. This was the ancient conflict she had sensed. Not a battle of swords and fire, but a clash of philosophies, of fear against freedom, order against wildness. The grey-cloaked figures whom the mire's oldest tales called the Stone Wardens of Stillness had sought to impose their rigid will upon the mire, believing its untamed exuberance was a danger. They had bound the deep dreamer, not out of malice, but out of a misguided desire for control, silencing its most vibrant creative dreams. "They thought they were helping," Elara explained to Pip, her voice tinged with a deep sadness. "They didn't understand that the mire's wildness gives its strength, its dreams Gary its lifeblood." The deep dreamer's nascent song seemed to echo her words, a mournful note weaving through the air. It felt a pang of ancient sorrow, a memory of its own boundless joy being slowly, gently, but irrevocably stifled. To restore the deep dreamer, Elara realized, wasn't just about breaking a spell. It was about healing a profound wound of misunderstanding, helping it forgive its misguided wardens, and most importantly, helping it rediscover its own untamed essence. The challenge lay in the lingering echoes of that stillness. Even with the spell broken, parts of the mire remained muted, gray, and unresponsive. These weren't areas of decay, but places where the deep dreamer's dreams had been most deeply suppressed, where the stone wardens had woven their magic with the greatest concentration. The creatures that lived in these zones, ancient salamanders with dull scales, sluggish glowworms and silent unblossoming water lilies, were still trapped in a low hum of existence, unable to fully awaken. Elara knew she had to venture into these stillness zones. The deep dreamer, in its weak state, could only provide fragmented guidance, like a flickering lantern in a vast, dark cavern. Its dreams, even when glimpsed, were clouded by its long slumber. It needed to remember itself, to gather the scattered fragments of its song which lay dormant in these muted places. With Pip nestled in her satchel, Elara began her journey deeper into the heart of the mire. The path was arduous. The ground often shifted unpredictably, and the air grew heavy, dampening the subtle magic that now pulsed through the rest of the mire. As they entered a stillness zone, the world seemed to dim. Colors faded, sounds muffled, and even the scent of the mire grew faint. It was like stepping into a dream that had been forgotten, a canvas left unfinished. Their first destination was a place the deep dreamer's faint hum had pointed to, the Whispering Fen, a notoriously silent stretch of marshland where no reeds rustled and no insects buzzed. As they approached, Elara noticed ancient stone markers, half submerged in the bog, carved with symbols she didn't recognize, but which resonated with the stone warden's desire for order. In the center of the fen stood a gnarled ancient cypress tree, its branches skeletal and draped with gray, brittle moss. It seemed to absorb all light and sound. The deep dreamer's song, which was a faint warm current in Elara's mind elsewhere, here felt like a cold, distant whisper. "This is it," Elara breathed, feeling a deep pressure in her chest. She approached the tree, her footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. As her hand touched its rough bark, a jolt went through her. Not of pain, but of profound, ancient sorrow. She saw a flash. The deep dreamer, in its youth, swirling with vibrant colors, its song a thunderous symphony that made the very air dance. Then the gray-robed figures, chanting, weaving threads of stillness around the tree, binding its roots, its branches, its very essence. Elara knew she couldn't simply break the spell again. This was a wound, not a cage. She closed her eyes, focusing on the deep dreamer's faint hum within her. She began to sing, not a song of power or command, but a lullaby, a melody of comfort and remembrance. It was a song she had learned from the mire, a tune of soft rain, growing roots, and the gentle sigh of the wind through reeds. She poured her empathy, her understanding, her love for the mire into each note. Slowly, impossibly, the gray moss on the cypress tree began to shimmer. A faint green blush spread through its brittle branches. The deep dreamer's hum in Elara's mind grew stronger, a single clear note emerging from the mournful whisper. It was a note of memory, a fragment of its original boundless song. As the note resonated, the silence of the whispering fen began to break. A tiny iridescent dragonfly, long dormant, stirred on a gray reed, its wings catching a sudden new glint of light. A sluggish glowworm pulsed with a brighter, warmer luminescence. The ancient sorrow emanating from the tree lessened, replaced by a profound sense of awakening. Elara spent days, then weeks, traveling through the mire's stillness zones, guided by the deep dreamer's slowly strengthening song. Each zone presented a similar challenge, a place where the stone warden's binding magic had created a pocket of unnatural quiet, a place where a fragment of the deep dreamer's true essence lay dormant. In the echoing caverns, where the wardens had tried to mute the mire's resonant earth song, Elara found ancient, petrified roots that had once pulsed with life. She sat among them, coaxing them with her own gentle singing, until faint echoes of the mire's deep, rumbling pulse began to reverberate through the stone once more. In the sunken gardens, where the wardens had sought to tame the mire's most flamboyant, light-chasing blooms, Elara found husks of what had once been magnificent, bioluminescent flowers. She didn't try to force them to bloom, but instead, she told them stories of the sun, of the moon, of the gentle breezes that carried pollen, reminding them of the joy of growth, of the purpose of their vibrant colors. Slowly, one by one, tiny phosphorescent buds began to unfurl, their petals glowing with a shy, tentative light. Pip was an invaluable companion. His keen sense of smell often led them to hidden pockets of stillness, and his cheerful chirps, even in the most muted areas, were a constant reminder of life's resilience. He would nudge Elara when she grew weary, or excitedly point out the first tiny sprout of green in a previously barren patch. As Elara gathered more fragments of the deep dreamer's song, its presence within her grew. She could feel its joy as life returned to the mire, its gratitude as its memories came flooding back. She also felt its lingering sadness, its struggle to reconcile the misguided intentions of the stone wardens with the pain they had caused. One evening, as Elara sat by a newly reawakened stream, its waters murmuring with a gentle current, the deep dreamer's song filled her mind with an overwhelming clarity. It wasn't just a hum now, but a tapestry of sounds. The rustle of unseen wings, the deep thrum of the earth, the whisper of ancient roots, the joyous gurgle of water. It was almost whole. But there was one final profound silence. The source of the warden's greatest power, the place where the binding spell had been most deeply anchored. It was a massive ancient stone circle, almost entirely swallowed by the mire, known only in whispers as the heart of stillness. Reaching it was a journey of weeks, through the deepest, most untouched parts of the mire, now slowly awakening around them. The journey felt like a pilgrimage. When they finally arrived, the heart of stillness was an immense, gray-lichened edifice of ancient stones, arranged in a perfect circle, radiating a palpable aura of muted power. No sound penetrated its perimeter. No light seemed to touch its stones. "This is where it began," Elara whispered, a shiver running down her spine. "And where it must truly end." The deep dreamer's song inside her was a powerful current now, but it met an impenetrable wall of silence as they approached the circle. It was here that the stone wardens had poured their fear of chaos, their desire for absolute order, into the mire's heart, binding the deep dreamer's wildest, most creative dreams. Elara knew that singing alone wouldn't be enough this time. This wasn't just about remembrance, it was about reconciliation. She walked to the center of the stone circle, Pip clinging to her shoulder, his usually brave chirps now subdued. She sat cross-legged on the cold, ancient stone. Closing her eyes, Elara reached out with her mind, not just to the deep dreamer, but to the lingering essence of the stone wardens themselves, whose presence, though faded, still clung to these stones. She projected images of the mire's beauty, its vibrant wild life, its interconnectedness. She showed them the harm their stillness had inadvertently caused, not with anger, but with understanding. She showed them that true order wasn't suppression, but the natural harmony of all things. Then she focused on the deep dreamer. She helped it see the warden's intentions, their misguided desire to protect, to create a safe, stable mire. She showed it that its wildest dreams, its most untamed imaginings, were not a threat, but a gift, a source of endless creation and renewal. And then, Elara began to sing. But this time, her song was different. It wasn't just a lullaby, or a song of memory. It was a symphony of balance. She wove together the deep resonant hum of the earth with the delicate trill of the highest marsh bird. She blended the chaotic rush of a spring flood with the quiet, persistent growth of a tiny seed. She sang of the beauty of both order and wildness, of the dance between stillness and movement, of the necessity of both for true life. As her song filled the heart of stillness, the gray lichen on the stones began to peel away, revealing ancient carvings beneath, not just symbols of order, but also symbols of spiraling growth, of flowing water, of creatures in joyful motion. The air around them began to shimmer, vibrating with a newfound energy. The deep dreamer's song, no longer fragmented, no longer hesitant, surged through Elara, through the stones, through the entire mire. It was a magnificent, multi-layered chorus, a symphony of dreams. It was the sound of creation itself, of life unfolding in every impossible, beautiful way. The mire responded with a breathtaking crescendo of its own. Luminous flowers burst into bloom on the ancient stones, bathing the circle in soft, shifting light. The still waters within the circle began to ripple, reflecting the newly vibrant sky. Ancient creatures, long dormant, stirred and stretched, their scales shimmering with renewed life. A warm, sweet breeze, carrying the scent of 1,000 newly opened blossoms, swept through the heart of stillness, carrying the deep dreamer's song to every corner of the mire. The deep dreamer was whole. Its song, once diminished, now pulsed with a wisdom that embraced both the wildness it had always embodied and the understanding of balance it had gained through its long slumber and its reawakening. It was no longer just the deep dreamer, but the heart song of the mire, forever dreaming, forever creating. Elara, exhausted but radiant, felt the deep dreamer's gratitude wash over her, a wave of pure, unconditional love. She had not only healed the mire, she had helped the deep dreamer find itself again, and in doing so, she had found her own purpose. She was the mire's empath, its voice, its guardian of dreams. Pip chittered joyfully, leaping onto her shoulder and nuzzling her cheek. The world around them was vibrant, alive, singing with 1,000 voices. The mire was not just restored, it was reborn, infused with a deeper understanding, a richer tapestry of life than ever before. Elara knew her journey was far from over. The mire would always have new mysteries, new challenges. But now, she walked with the deep dreamer's song in her heart, a constant melody of wonder and possibility. She would continue to listen, to learn, and to help the mire dream its wildest, most beautiful dreams. As the first star twinkled above the newly luminous mire, Elara smiled, a profound sense of peace settling over her. The deep dreamer's song was echoing across the land, a gentle promise that all dreams, even the forgotten ones, could awaken and bloom once more. And with that thought, Elara finally drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, her own dreams now intertwined with the vibrant, endless song of the mire.